For thousands of years, one story has haunted humanity. A tale whispered across continents, reshaped by time and buried in mystery. An island larger than Libya and Asia combined. A civilization so advanced it could conquer the known world, until it vanished without a trace. People have argued over its existence, fought to prove it real, and spent fortunes searching for it. But here's the question nobody agrees on. Was Atlantis ever real? Or has the entire planet been chasing a ghost that never existed? To find the answer, we have to go back to the very first time Atlantis ever appeared in the historical record. That takes us to ancient Greece around 360 BCE, when one of the most influential philosophers of all time, Plato, wrote about it in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In those texts, he claimed that Atlantis existed 9,200 years before his lifetime, a claim that, if true, would make its story older than the Great Pyramids, older than Homer's Iliad, and possibly older than any other written record we've ever discovered. Plato didn't describe Atlantis as a tiny speck of land somewhere in the sea. He painted a picture of a sprawling island located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar, and home to a civilization unmatched in its time. The Atlanteans, as he described them, had vast farmlands, rich natural resources, dazzling temples, and a naval fleet capable of challenging any empire in the known world. They weren't content to keep their power to themselves. They expanded outward, conquering territories all around the Mediterranean. But as the story goes, their ambition became their downfall. Atlantis grew corrupt, drowning in greed and arrogance, until a cataclysm, earthquakes, floods, or perhaps both, destroyed it completely, swallowing it into the sea. Even if you take Plato's story at face value, there's one detail that makes historians raise an eyebrow: the way he supposedly learned it. According to Plato, he got the story from his grandfather, who heard it from a man named Dropides. Dropides learned it from the famous Athenian statesman Solon, who in turn had heard it from Egyptian priests during a visit to the city of Sais. That means the Atlantis story had already crossed thousands of miles and passed through at least 4 different people before Plato ever put it in writing. And we're not talking about a few days or weeks of retelling. We're talking about generations. Every time a story is retold, it changes. Details are added, embellishments grow, and facts bend to the storyteller's memory. By the time Plato heard it, the Atlantis story may have been radically different from whatever version, if any, had existed centuries earlier. And yet this ancient game of telephone doesn't stop people from wondering whether Atlantis could have been real. History, after all, has a way of turning myths into reality. Take Troy, for example. For centuries, Homer's epic war story in the Iliad was considered pure legend, a poetic invention with no historical foundation. Then, in the 1870s, German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann uncovered the ruins of a city in modern-day Turkey that matched Homer's descriptions almost perfectly. Suddenly, a place once dismissed as fiction was part of the historical record. If Troy could turn out to be real, then why not Atlantis? That single possibility is enough to keep explorers, researchers, and treasure hunters chasing the legend to this day. But if you believe Atlantis might be real, the next question is obvious. Where should you look? Over the centuries, people have proposed dozens of possible locations, each one with its own set of clues, theories, and passionate defenders. Some researchers point to the marshlands of Doñana National Park in Andalusia, Spain, claiming it could be the site of the ancient city of Tartessos, a wealthy port civilization that vanished mysteriously. Others turn to the island of Crete and the Minoan civilization, which flourished until around 1600 BCE, when the island of Thera, now known as Santorini, erupted in one of the most violent volcanic explosions in human history. The eruption sent tsunamis racing across the Aegean Sea, darkened skies with volcanic ash, and wiped out entire settlements in a matter of days. Farther west lies Sardinia, an island dotted with mysterious Bronze Age stone towers called nuraghes. Some believe Sardinia was once a hub for the enigmatic Sea Peoples, a mysterious group who appeared seemingly out of nowhere and devastated civilizations across the Mediterranean before disappearing just as suddenly. In the eastern Mediterranean, the island of Cyprus hides unusual structures deep underwater, over 1,500 meters below the surface. Whether they're natural formations or the remains of human-built settlements is still debated. Even more intriguing is the Rishat structure in Mauritania, nicknamed the Eye of the Sahara. From space, it's a massive set of concentric rings carved into the desert, eerily similar to Plato's description of Atlantis' circular capital city. Others look to the Azores, a remote group of islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that could have served as a strategic midpoint between the Old and New worlds. And then there are the truly far-flung theories that Atlantis was hidden under the sands of Antarctica before the continent froze over, or that it was somewhere in the Bahamas or even in the Americas themselves. None of these theories have been proven. But that hasn't stopped people from searching, because if even one turned out to be right, it would rewrite human history. Still, there's a significant possibility that everyone's been looking in the wrong place, because maybe there never was a place to find. Many scholars today believe Atlantis was never meant to be taken literally. To them, it was a moral allegory, a fictional empire created by Plato to teach a lesson about the dangers of greed, arrogance, and the abuse of power. Plato was famous for this style of teaching. His Allegory of the Cave used a fictional scenario about prisoners in a cave mistaking shadows for reality to make a point about perception and truth. In the same way, Atlantis may have been a utopia turned corrupt, meant not as a historical record but as a warning. If that's true, then searching for Atlantis might be like trying to locate the actual street where Aesop's fables took place. But here's the twist. In Plato's time, the line between history and myth wasn't as clear as it is today. Philosophers, historians, and poets often blurred the two, weaving moral lessons into stories that still felt true to their audiences. When Plato described Atlantis in such vivid geographical detail, many of his readers could have assumed he was recounting an actual place, not a parable. That's part of why the legend had such staying power, because even if Plato's intention was purely philosophical, the imagery he created was so tangible that people couldn't help but imagine it on a map. And yet, the legend didn't fade. In 1882, American politician Ignatius Donnelly reignited public obsession when he published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. Donnelly claimed Atlantis wasn't just real, it was the cradle of all civilization. In his view, every major ancient culture, from Egypt to the Mayans, could trace its origins back to this one lost empire. He argued that similarities in architecture, mythology, and agriculture across distant continents were evidence of a shared origin, Atlantis. His ideas were pure speculation, but they were irresistible to the public, feeding into a late 19th century appetite for exploration, mystery, and grand historical revelations. From that point on, Atlantis was no longer just an ancient Greek myth. It was a global obsession. If Atlantis really was a fabrication, what could have inspired it? Historians have pointed to several real-world events that might have blended together into the legend over centuries. The eruption of Thera around 1600 BCE, which devastated the Minoans, could account for the sudden destruction by natural disaster. The obliteration of the Greek city of Helike in 373 BCE, swallowed by an earthquake and tsunami during Plato's own lifetime, might have given him a vivid example of how quickly a city could vanish. The mysterious Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, in which multiple civilizations across the Mediterranean fell within decades, could have provided a backdrop of chaos and cultural disappearance. And the catastrophic Athenian invasion of Sicily in 415 BCE, a military disaster born of overconfidence, mirrors Plato's moral themes of hubris leading to ruin. The truth is, Atlantis holds our attention because it sits at the perfect intersection of hope and warning. The hope is that somewhere out there, buried beneath centuries of ocean and earth, might be the remains of a civilization so advanced it could change everything we know about history. The warning is that even the mightiest civilizations can fall. And when they do, they can disappear so completely that future generations will argue about whether they ever existed at all. If Plato's Atlantis was purely fictional, then its real treasure isn't gold, marble, or advanced technology. It's the lesson hidden in the story. It's a reminder about the fragility of greatness, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the speed with which nature can erase even the most powerful empires. But if there's even a shred of truth, then the ruins of Atlantis are still out there, waiting for the right set of eyes, the right dive, or the right stroke of luck to bring them back into the light. And maybe that's the real magic of Atlantis. Not the place itself, but the chase. The idea that some mysteries are worth pursuing, even if the answers never come. Because as long as we're still asking the question, the legend will never sink.